Hey guys! So today's movie is The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, directed by Emmerich Powell and Michael Pressburger circa 1943. The premise of the movie is that it essentially details 40 years in the life of a British military man, Clive Candy, from the early 1900s to World War II. The two major through lines of the movie are Clive's relationships with several women, all played by Deborah Kerr, and his friendship with a German soldier, Theo. The movie starts with a group of home front soldiers prankishly derailing a military war game to take Clive hostage as a prank. This captures really well some of the themes of the movie, in that it's about friction with the culture of the British military gentleman and the clash between the old and the new. This is when we flash back to Clive's life as a young man, wherein he breaks the rules to respond to a request by a woman several degrees separated from him. The request being to stop the spread of propaganda about England within Berlin. His actions here contain a really interesting paradox in that he could be said to be breaking English decorum to defend English decorum. He goes to a restaurant with the woman Edith and winds up corralling the orchestra therein to troll the one spreading the propaganda, a former prisoner of his, and even winds up punching the guy when it becomes an altercation. Because Clive is an officer, the Germans are able to invite him to duel an officer of their own, Theo, chosen at random. The two wind up in the same nursing home being treated for their injuries and become close friends in spite of the language barrier between them. Theo winds up proposing to Edith, and Clive, in spite of his unrequited feelings for Edith, supports them. During World War One, Clive meets another woman, a British nurse who looks just like Edith, and winds up marrying her. But the more important progression occurs when Theo winds up in a POW camp and Clive tries to see him. Theo isn't able to greet Clive with the warmth he would want to because he's constrained by his status as a German officer. A particularly telling visual of this is Theo melting into the ranks of his fellow officers during an orchestral concert in the camp. When he's about to leave, Theo apologizes to Clive, and the two wind up having dinner together, along with Theo's fellow officers. When he's about to leave, Theo apologizes to Clive, and the two wind up having dinner together, along with Clive's fellow officers. Theo is disgusted by the attempt of the officers to comfort him, and sees an opportunity to exploit English goodwill. Not long after, we see Theo as an older man, now regretting the way his vengeful feelings facilitated Hitler's rise to power, and attempting to emigrate to England, which he manages thanks to Clive. The two rekindle their friendship, forging a mutual bond with yet another woman who looks like Edith, Johnny Cannon. Not long after, the military retires Clive from his position as a general, and he winds up being a superior for the home front army. We see the result of the prank and find Clive goes out of his way to protect, and even intends to reward, the young officer who pulled the prank in the name of strategy. Clive realizes he hasn't changed, in juxtaposition with his realization that it's time for him to change. One of the most immediately interesting decisions to me is that of having Deborah Kerr play several different women. It's kind of like the reverse of Louis Buñuel's That Obscure Object of Desire. In Buñuel's film, the same character is played by two different women. In Powell and Pressburger's film, different women are played by the same woman. In both cases, the purpose of this stylistic decision is a perception of women by the locus of the male perspective. Buñuel makes it nigh impossible to tell the true nature of his female lead in tandem with switching his actresses. Buñuel is tackling the issue of female unpredictability, at least as a symptom of how men view women. In Powell and Pressburger's work, social changes for women are commented on, but the divine beauty of womanhood remains unchanged no matter how society changes. This stylistic decision gets across the friction between old and new, temporal and eternal pretty well. The friendship between Clive and Theo gets it across really well too. In fact, we might even say that they themselves represent the connection between forces of temporality and eternity. Every time we see Theo, he changes noticeably. The one thing that ever seems to change is his friendship with Clive, who generally remains consistent in his character. And the two wind up balancing each other, with Edith arguably acting as a ballast for Theo as well. Clive's relationship with Theo highlights the way the good in Theo is sustained. Theo is able to honestly tell Clive how things have changed and confront him with the need to adapt. We can see the English military youth of the movie embodying the paradox in that they're constantly creating change, yet the youthful need to create change by bucking the older generation is eternal. I really like that this movie is a paean to universal humanity. It reminds me a bit of Renoir's work in that regard, or even Powell and Pressburger's other works such as A Matter of Life and Death. Even in spite of a significant language barrier, in spite of coming from different cultures, Teo and Clive are able to connect. And I could almost call the way Teo learns English over the movie a reflection of how their shared humanity ultimately wins out. But the movie is more complicated than that. There are a number of touches that get across the pervasive influence of the socializing institutions that divide the two. But I specifically want to talk about the dinner Teo has with Clive's fellow officers. For Teo, losing the war means returning to a Germany that's absolutely hopeless. He's near consumed by an almost nihilistic despair, and the well-meaning officers just kind of inflame it. Teo ultimately comes to think fondly of those officers, but he's not entirely wrong about them. The officers do kind of treat war like a game. To them, when war is over, the game is over. And England and Germany should be sporting and make nice with each other. They don't understand the consequences of what their war actually means for Germany in the long run. They don't understand the desperate despair of the Germans. And this partially feeds into Hitler's rise to power. For all this, it's a markedly gentle movie. Not saccharine, but reserved. One stylistic decision that conveys this is the way the movie tastefully cuts away from the initial duel between Teo and Clive. The fact that they're even having the duel, and the rules of the duel, are more important than the duel itself. By the rules of the game, you could call it a very English approach to the film's subject matter. But the fact that the movie seems to understand the feelings of the Germans, and respects German culture, allows the portrayal to be more nuanced than it potentially could have been. One little metaphor I really love involves Clive's mustache. He grows one after seeing Teo's, and since Germans are known to love showing off scars, it's used to highlight their mutual distaste for the violence of combat. In a fashion, they both have a gentlemanly nature. Generally, we can find the meaning of a film in the ending that it gives us. A logline is essentially what happens in a film, and the ending is generally the first thing any screenwriter should know. But in this case, I actually think the bookends belie the film's better nature. Because as much as the movie is about change and placing young and old in a context of human universality, the way in which it's truly moving is how it depicts human connection. The friendship at the center of the movie that remains unbroken by war, time, language, and national division is the best messenger of the movie's true beauty. Right. Thanks for listening, guys. Like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and have a nice day.